wanted to make a quick response to the various comments I have thus far received on my Twilight to read or not to read video. First of all, thanks to everyone who watched it and who is watching this. It's been great to hear people's thoughts. I really love that YouTube provides a forum where you can have this kind of conversation with people that you have never met and probably will never meet. So, thanks YouTube. I noticed one thread ran through a lot of the comments, and I'd really like to respond to that. A lot of people had a response somewhere along the lines of, right, I see what you're saying, and I agree that really ideally girls shouldn't be completely consumed with the idea of romantic relationships, but, you know, Twilight's just a book, and I can read it like it's a book, and you should read it like it's a book, and we should realize that books don't reflect reality. And I totally agree. I mean, obviously books don't reflect reality, and the more that we can kind of be conscious of that, the better. But I actually think that's a little more difficult than it sounds sometimes, and a little more difficult than we even realize it to be. The reason for that is psychological. Basically, humans have evolved to form these mental models that summarize the way that the world works and make predictions about what's going to happen in a given situation. The way we make these models is we observe our surroundings and things that happen to us and the things that happen to people that we see, and we kind of mash those all together, and then they become this picture in our mind of kind of the general order of things. Now, the thing is that as we're forming this model, some experiences carry more weight than others. The things that have happened to us most recently have a greater impact on our expectations about the way things work. Also, things that are really unique or unusual kind of stick out in our mind. But my real point is that we're not necessarily able to distinguish in this process between things that have really happened to us and things that we've heard stories about. This makes sense when you think about the fact that most likely, early on in our history, the stories that humans told were about real life. There were probably stories told around campfires in which bands of hunters related the tale of how they took down the mastodon, or someone told someone else about how they were picking berries and their friend got really sick because he ate them. The stories were helpful to early humans because they allowed us to communicate and thus to learn from experiences that we hadn't actually had. As long as someone had had a certain experience, they could tell a story about it and we could incorporate it into our working model of the world. The problem is eventually survival was no longer our sole concern, and so we started telling stories that didn't necessarily relate directly to avoiding death. We started making up fictional stories, and those fictional stories strayed farther and farther away from the goal of conveying information indispensable to survival. But by that point, the story listening part of our brain was already pretty much wired. And so basically we're stuck with this mental mechanism whereby any stories to which we're exposed, whether they're fictional or non-fictional, we treat those stories as though they really happened, and we incorporate them into our expectations about the way the world works. Now obviously this doesn't happen on a conscious level, and so as you're reading a story, you can step back and say, I know this doesn't really happen, I know vampires don't really exist, and you can even say, I know that even though in this story it seems like it's really, really important for a girl to have a boyfriend, actually logically I can conclude that that's not true. But that doesn't stop the story from going into that part of your brain where you're forming the expectations about what's going to happen to you in the future. And it's because that's not a process we can consciously control that I think we should be more careful than we sometimes are about the kinds of stories that we expose ourselves to in the first place. So that's my response to that idea. I'd love to hear what you think about that. Also, I've been just as interested by the tenor of the comments I've received as I have been by their content. I posted this video on a couple different places, and I posted it as a response to a couple different videos, and the types of comments that I've gotten in response have been very, very different. First of all, I posted it on the Ning, which is the official Nerdfighters website, and the comments I got there have been incredibly well-reasoned and logical and supportive. That doesn't really surprise me, but I'd just like to acknowledge and publicly appreciate it. Whew. I also posted in response to 2 different Twilight movie trailers. One is the actual trailer, and one is a fake trailer that someone put together from clips from some other movie or something. I don't really understand it entirely. But the interesting thing has been that the responses to the actual trailer were all kind of eerily positive, and even the people who said, ultimately, I don't agree with you, or ultimately, I think you're taking yourself too seriously, still I can see what you're saying. But the more recent comments seem to have come from people who got there from the fake movie trailer, and they are just nastier. They're basically saying the same things, but they use more derogative terminology and less punctuation. And it's just a very interesting contrast because it's so stark. I'm still working on hypotheses about why I'm seeing those differences, but I have one that seems possible. If you look at the comments in response to this fake trailer, a lot of people seem angry as though they were expecting a real trailer and then they're disappointed that they got this fake trailer. And I'm wondering whether they're carrying that anger over, and so then when they watch my video, they're still angry about this fake trailer, and so that influences the way that they comment. Alternately, it could just be that a different kind of person is going to these 2 different kinds of websites. I'm not really sure. But I think it's kind of interesting. Maybe I'll do my thesis on the anthropology of YouTube. Anyway, those are the main responses I want to make at the moment. I might make another one later if we get more comments. In the meantime, keep thinking, keep reading, keep thinking about what you're reading.